For this discussion, Egypt will join the case filed by South Africa against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Cairo is concerned, it says, about what it's calling Israeli aggression against Palestinian civilians. Now, you'll remember the ICJ heard South Africa's case accusing Israel of violating the Genocide Convention. That was in January of this year. More than 35,000 people have been killed since October last year. Let's unpack this story. Joining us is the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center, Jeenah. It's great to talk to you as always. Thanks for coming on. And of course, Cairo was also the site of those negotiations, right, between Israel and Hamas. How much of a move is this for them to join South Africa's genocide case against Israel?
Well, Michelle, on the face of it, it's a huge thing. I mean, Egypt is Israel's most important ally in the Arab world. The Camp David Accord between Egypt and Israel is kind of solid and was the beginning of much of the kind of normalization with other Arab states, including most recently, for example, Morocco, Sudan, etc. So on the face of it, it's a huge thing and supposedly a huge blow to Israel's diplomacy in the Arab world. And because it's such a huge thing, one wonders whether what we see on the face of it is it. This kind of a huge development usually would take place incrementally. It's not something that will suddenly happen. They have great relationships and then suddenly the one says, I'm taking you to the ICJ or I'm supporting you being taken to the ICJ. Sounds very odd. The question is there something else behind this, or is it what we're seeing on the face of it sufficient?
And how much of a blow is this to Israel, and how much, if it is indeed the sucker punch that it's being described as by certain sectors, how much of that will actually force Israel into some sort of action?
No such action is going to force Israel to take note and stop its genocide. That's clear. UN resolutions, including in the Security Council, the ICJ saying that there's a plausibility that it's genocide, the threat of some politicians and military people in Israel being taken to the ICC. None of it has stopped Israel's genocide. In fact, the intransigence has become worse. I mean, you have an Israeli ambassador who, in the UN General Assembly, tears up the UN Charter in front of all the delegates. That's quite something. Or refers to the UN Secretary General as a terrorist. That's quite something. So clearly, nothing will stop them except the United States using the leverage that it has over Israel. And over the past 7 months, the US has refused to use that leverage. And so, Israel, even if Egypt were to break ties completely with Israel, it wouldn't stop Israel and its genocide. And that's why my question, whether there's something more behind this announcement by Egypt than just, we really angry that you massacring Palestinians, which, as if they haven't been angry before. So this is something new. And so we're going to take action and not just make a strong statement, but we're going to take really serious action, joining South Africa's case, knowing how Israel relates to that case. So what could, a kind of non-revealed agenda or reason be? I think it's quite possible that, we have last week a ceasefire deal that was put on the table by the mediators. That's Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. Hamas, on behalf of the resistance in Gaza, accepted the ceasefire deal. Israel has not. And so this could be an attempt by the United States to kind of apply pressure on Israel, but not directly, so that Joe Biden continues to be seen as a great supporter of Israel, but gets Egypt to play the bad boy in a sense. I mean, this is speculation, of course, but it is never what it seems.
No, it isn't. And we're always getting just a glimpse of the picture, aren't we? We really don't, if we're not in the room, we don't know what's unfolding with these negotiations. If indeed that is the case, I've just lost my train for a moment, but is that deal, that ceasefire deal, which Hamas agreed to, is it still on the table?
It still is on the table. I mean, there's no new deal. Hamas has said that they accept. They haven't revoked the acceptance of the deal. The mediators haven't come up with a new deal. So it's still on the table for Israel to accept. Israel hasn't rejected it outright. What they did say was that they will go into Rafah. So the possibility is, if Israel's mind is changed by the United States in particular, the possibility is that they'll make a big hoo-ha and one big bombardment in Rafah. Just to say that they've got some kind of a victory, whatever, and then they might accept the deal. Or they just thumb their nose even at the U.S. and go into Rafah and commit huge massacre there as they can. So one doesn't know where it will go, but the deal is still on the table. I mean, theoretically, Israel could this afternoon say that they accept the deal.
But we know people have already been killed in Rafah, and Israel says that a full-scale offensive is needed in Rafah to defeat Hamas.
Yes, that's what they've been saying, and it seems like a slow escalation towards that. They could dial it back at any time, of course, if they decide to, but it is escalating. The other thing, of course, is the reason that Netanyahu feels that he needs to, show something, and massacring 1.5 million people in Rafah will certainly be showing something, is because in the past 7 months, he set himself, or the government set itself, 2 objectives, and neither of them has been met. The 2 objectives was, one, that they will crush Hamas, and number 2, that they will free the Israeli captives who are held in Gaza. None of those 2 has happened. Hamas continues operating, not only Hamas, the other resistance groups as well, continue operating not only in or from Rafah, but even in the north of Gaza, where Israel claims that it has control. There are resistance operations taking place there all the time. As for the captives, the only ones who have been freed were those that were exchanged in that prisoner exchange. Israel, apart from that, has not succeeded in freeing any of the captives. So after 7 months of genocide, they've delivered nothing. And, to any rational normal person, that might sound like, okay, it's time to throw in the towel. But clearly to the Israeli government, that's not the case. They want to escalate and kill more people. And Netanyahu, of course, also thinks that if he kills more Palestinians, that might keep him out of prison in Israel.
So you would agree then, Naeem, with the idea that Israel has to now listen to the rest of the world, at least those countries in the world that are joining calls now for Israel to scale back its military operations in Gaza. Does Israel have to listen to the world? Does Benjamin Netanyahu have to listen to the world, or else, in the months and years to come, he will face a certain fate? Or is it all about Israeli opinion that is asking and demanding revenge for the October 7 attack?
So from any perspective of morality or ethics or international law, Israel has to listen to the rest of the world. But clearly that's not how Israel operates, and they will do whatever they like, unless there's pressure brought to bear on them, and no one is, those who have that pressure are not willing to bring it to bear. The one kind of threat that it seems the Israelis are a little concerned about is the threat that this will now become a case at the ICC, and people such as Netanyahu, some of his ministers, some of his generals, there might be warrants of arrest issued for them, which will make the world much smaller for them in terms of how they can travel, etc. That kind of very practical possible consequence has them a little concerned. But as long as they believe that they can do what they like without any consequence, they will continue. And as I said, the only consequence is the United States threatening and taking action against them. And at the moment, that doesn't seem to be the case.
And why is that, Naeem? Arguably, not even arguably, factually, the U.S. has the ability to bring this to a halt, to take some action to stop what's happening on the Gaza Strip? Why not do it?
Yeah, they definitely do. And, in the past, there have been cases, particularly under Republican governments. I mean, George Bush the first, when Israel wanted to build a whole lot of new settlements, threatened them that he would withhold military aid, and they stopped. Because it seemed that he was serious. So right now, I mean, this is not just about building settlements, this is about a genocide. Why won't the U.S. take stronger action? One is that Joe Biden believes that by continuing to uncritically support Israel, he has won up over his rival in the coming elections. That's Donald Trump. Sorry. And so for Biden, it's a lot of it has to do with the elections,
Wow.
as well as the fact that he sees himself as 100% a Zionist. I think he's miscalculating on the elections, though. I mean, the vast majority of those students who are in encampments at the universities now, the vast majority of them are or would be members of the Democratic Party. So his own base is now saying that they will not support him in the election, and his position on Israel will mean that he most likely will lose the election.
Yeah. And at what cost, right? Apparently at the cost of almost 40,000 people killed in Gaza, the bulk of them women and children. Naeem, Jeenah, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on to the program. Naeem is the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center.